Welcome to another Legacy Warriors podcast where we break down the top two feeder leagues to the UFC and in part to the Contender Series, whether it's Cage Warriors, which is usually killing it over there on the European scene, or like we're talking about this weekend, the LFA, which has their 216th event this weekend, and it goes down in Brazil, and it is headlined by a women's strawweight title fight between champion Lani Silva and oncoming undefeated challenger Aitza Bertolso. Very fun matchup there. Interesting dynamic between the Muay Thai stylings of Silva and the grappling prowess of Bertolso, and I can't wait to break down that fight for you guys. A lot of action on that fight as well, with Silva going anywhere from minus 250 all the way down to minus 155, which is where she currently finds herself. But we'll talk about that once we get to that fight later on in this podcast. All in all, I believe there are 13 fights for this LFA card. Not a great betting card all in all. You know what I mean? There's just so much chalk. There's a lot of uncertainty on some of these spots, and there's just a lot of unparlayable fights, right? Like if you guys have been watching me for a while, you know I don't like parlaying anything more than minus 700-ish, and there's a handful of fights on this card that are over minus 700 and probably worthy of being over that minus 700 range, but I'm going to really gloss over a lot of those chalky spots because I don't think they're worth even talking about, especially when the underdogs are just pushovers in the most part. So yeah, I do quickly want to plug the MMA Fight Archive in case you like doing your own research, especially for these Brazilian cards where it's harder to find tape on these regional fights. I do a great job in terms of finding the tape and putting it all in one place for you guys to be able to research yourself so you know what to expect when they step foot in the cage this weekend. And hey, maybe you're able to find something on these big underdogs that I'm missing from the MMA Fight Archive, and then you can maybe cash out on some underdogs as well. So there's a 7-day free trial. Check the link in the description below. Where we're over 5,700 fighter profiles on there, over 115 subscribers on the service as well. You can try it out for free. Like I said, 7-day free trial. Link in the description below. That is the MMA Fight Archive. All right. Let's get right into this breakdown. Again, a handful of these super chalky. I'm just going to gloss over them. Macon Douglas, minus 5,000 against Joseph Yohan, plus 1,800. Douglas smash, but we don't parlay minus 5,000. Next up, Neto Lopes coming in at minus 900, going up against Thiago Oliveira, who comes in at plus 600. Lopes, somewhat average, at least to my eye, but he's very highly touted, and obviously the odds are showcasing that here. Oliveira, a very aggressive striker that is a little bit too reckless at times. I think that Lopes can counter him effectively, but more than likely take him to the ground, where Oliveira has shown issues in the past, and I think we see Lopes get a finish there, but we don't parlay minus 900. Next up, we got Italo Cruz coming in at minus 415, going up against Rodrigo Paiva, who comes in at plus 315. Cruz started his MMA career 0-2, but has bounced back. He took 7 years away after that 0-2 start. He's bounced back. Now he's on a 4-fight winning streak. He has very solid striking, especially when he gets into his flow state early. If he can't find that finish early, he starts to get to his grappling, and that's where he's often able to outgrind his opponents. And it might tax his gas tank later on, but usually does a great job in terms of moving and treading the cage well, and then crashing the pocket and getting into the clinch situations where he can eat up some more time and stay away from the dangers that his opponents normally present. His opponent, Rodrigo Paiva, comes in with a 3-0 record. His first two fights were actually back in 2018. Then he took 6.5 years off, returning to action in April, where he was nearly finished, getting ground and pounded by his opponent, but luckily he threw up an armbar and was able to force the tap from his opponent. And that's where he seems though he's best. He has 2 wins by armbar, very quick when he throws up that armbar to try to snatch it up and force the tap, and he's done it twice out of his 3 wins so far. On the feet, he leaves a lot of openings that I think that Cruz can really take advantage of here, and I think we'll see Cruz box him up on the feet, and I think he'll probably find that knockout as well. You know, in these LFA Brazil matchups, you can often tell where the regional, or at least where the promotion is looking to try to push a certain opponent or fighter, and it seems like that's what they're doing here with Cruz to take out Rodrigo Paiva, hopefully in a highlight reel fashion. All right, next up, we got Wiley Pereira coming in at -200, going up against Enrique Barbosa, who comes in at +170. Pereira pulled off a decision victory back in May. Unfortunately, the LFA did not broadcast it, so we're unable to see how exactly he did it. But if his previous tape tells us anything, he usually does a great job in terms of taking his opponents to the ground and eventually finding a submission opportunity or finding dominant positions that he can control his opponents. He's faced quite low-level competition throughout his career, so it's a little bit tricky in terms of seeing how effective he can be against guys that are going to provide legitimate resistance to him. His striking is usually just a lot of pressure, a lot of feinting takedowns, level changes, a lot of big power shots, but it's all about getting fights to the ground where he often finds himself being most comfortable. Now he's going up against Enrique Barbosa, who's actually a training partner of Charles Oliveira, obviously training out of that Diego Lima shoot-to-box camp. Solid striker, good combinations, decent power. He brings in a 3-fight winning streak after stumbling back in December of 2019. He took 2.5 years away from action after that loss, and he was able to pick up a win there. And then now he's actually taken 2 years away again and coming back after an extended layoff. I'm not entirely sure what kept him out of competition, but the guy looks like he's in absolutely crazy good shape. And if he can match his skill set with his physicality, he could look like a pretty good underdog in this spot. The issue that I have is that I don't have enough legitimate tape on what he brings to the table in terms of his actual striking or defensive grappling, because he's clearly going to get tested in that realm. I think he's the better striker here, but he doesn't present a whole lot of issues in my opinion. I think Pereira should be able to navigate the striking well enough to eventually drag this fight to the ground, and I think from there he should do a good job in terms of stifling Barbosa on the mat and keeping him there. At -200, I'm a little bit questionable about it, hesitant in terms of taking that chalk. Again, the main reason being Barbosa's unknowns in the grappling realm, and not to mention his extended layoff and how he might look coming off of that here against Pereira. If Barbosa can keep this in the striking realm, he could end up looking like the -200 favorite, but I'm just not willing to take the plunge there to find out. All right, a quick one we're going to gloss over here again. Marcos Aurelio coming in at -15,000. Not -150, not -1,500, -15,000 against Andre Rodrigues, who comes in at +2,500. Aurelio wins. Great grappler, just great all around. He wins, but we're not parlaying -15,000. Our next up, we got Alan Ribeiro coming in at +110, going up against Levi Rodrigues, who comes in at -130. Now, Ribeiro is a training partner of UFC light heavyweight Bruno Lopes, and Ribeiro normally does a good job in terms of implementing his striking, good movement, good agility, good swift striking, I should say. He looks very comfortable in the striking realm, and his speed allows him to really land those big shots with precision and timing, so that he can really just get the most impact out of those shots as well. His defensive grappling looks pretty okay. He took, in June 2019, he picked up his first victory in just 55 seconds. Then he took 5 years away from action and got back-to-back knockouts in April of 2024 and May of 2025. So it's good that he's starting to get the reps in and be a little bit quicker, because on paper, he looks to be a decent prospect considering the way he moves and the comfort in which he showcases in the striking realm as well. He's going up against Levi Rodrigues, who's been out of action, at least from the LFA, for at least 2 years. He had 2 solid knockout wins in November of 2022 and May of 2023 before taking time away for undisclosed reasons. He returned to action in April of 2025 under a new promotion called MMA University, which I believe is a Fighting Nerds promotion. And it was a tepid pace striking approach that he utilized for about 2 rounds. His opponent didn't really do much either other than showboat and kind of goat Rodrigues into throwing with him. And then in the opening exchange of the 3rd round, his opponent actually injured his shoulder. So Rodrigues picks up the win there by TKO injury in a sense. He's a decent striker as well. I think he's a little bit... a little bit stiff with his striking, and that's kind of the issue that I have with him in this matchup. He showcases discipline and tactical striking, but just a little bit stiff at times. He went 5-0 as an amateur, finishing all 5 of those opponents in the first minute, but he's taken his time a little bit more throughout his pro MMA career. Although he did have a 32-second knockout to start his MMA career, he's taken a little bit more time over his next couple of wins. To me, it seems like Ribeiro is a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more promising in the striking realm, considering he looks a little bit more fluid and throws with a little bit more precision. And if he can keep that movement up and counter Rodrigues here, and most importantly, utilize his speed advantage, he can definitely ding up Rodrigues at a good rate in this spot. The issue just is both guys are clearly in the developmental stages of their careers, and I just don't know what they look like against legitimate resistance. This will easily be the toughest test for both guys in their careers, and even though Rodrigues seems to have a little bit more experience, Ribeiro's ability to just look like the cleaner striker makes me lean him in this spot. Now, Rodrigues could go out there and probably look to take Ribeiro to the ground and maybe have some success there, but nothing in his game has really shown me that that's what he wants to do. Both guys look to strike. Both guys look to knock their opponents out. And I'm going to have to lean to Ribeiro ever so slightly with very low confidence to pull off the victory here with his speed and seemingly technical striking advantage. All right, another squash match here. Eduardo Dutra coming in at minus 10,000 going up against Jefferson dos Santos. Dutra wins. Squash match. Better everywhere. This is a setup match, but we're not parlaying. Minus 10,000. Next up, we got Daniel Araujo coming in at minus 1,200 going up against Thomas Bryan, who comes in at plus 750. Now, this fight, I believe, was supposed to take place back in May, but a fight day illness to Bryan pulled him out of the matchup, and now the LFA has decided to reschedule it for this weekend. Now, Araujo made a very solid showing in his LFA debut back in March, where he picked apart Ramazan Temirov, Zizbek Temirov, who is actually the brother of UFC fighter Ramazan Temirov, and it seemed like Araujo was able to utilize his boxing skills to really thwart the explosive nature of Temirov's striking. Temirov was throwing with big heat and looking to land some big shots, but Araujo stayed consistent with his jab, stuck and moved very well, utilized good footwork, and that allowed him to really just outstrike Temirov and win that fight on the scorecards. It was a very promising and very solid performance all around from the Brazilian fighter. I expect him to continue that showcase here against Bryan, who is a little bit too reckless on the feet, which leaves many openings for his opponents to get the better of him. And then from there, he often looks to get fights to the mat where he ends up trusting his BJJ a little bit too much, and that's where we see him fighting off his back a little bit too long and then eating up too much time and letting his opponents win just off of control. In this matchup, Bryan might be able to jump on the back of Araujo, but I don't give that a high probability of occurring. I think Araujo boxes him up, touches him up, maybe finishes him, but we don't parlay minus 1,200 anyway, so there's no point in getting too deep into this matchup. All right, next up, we got Jonathan Elias coming in at minus 160 going up against Douglas Lapa, who comes in at plus 140. Now, Elias at 23 years old looks like a decent prospect. He is a BJJ black belt. He went 2-0 as an amateur, finishing both fights by submission. He then turned his attention to the pro ranks in 2022 and has pulled off 6 wins, although 2 of them are ineligible on the Tapology database. The 4 that are eligible have him finishing each opponent in the first round, with 3 of them by submission. He gives me like poor man's Bruno Ferreira vibes, where he just throws big power on the feet and then eventually looks to slam opponents to the ground, where he mostly does his best work. But he's usually running over a lot of these guys, so there's a lot of question marks in terms of how he's going to deal with guys that can actually stop his takedowns and then force him to strike for longer periods of time. All of his wins coming in the first round, so we don't have a big indicator in terms of what his gas tank will look like. But given how he fights and the energy and explosions that he uses, it doesn't really make me believe he can go into deep water and be effective. Now, I think he's going to get challenged here against Douglas Lapa, who comes from a kickboxing background, has a 4-0 record, has a couple fights where he's gone the distance as well and showcases that he has a good gas tank to utilize it. He throws great combinations, utilizes his footwork well. He knows how to eat up the clock in certain situations, which really helps him drag fights into deeper water, and then that allows his striking to come to fruition a little bit easier as well. He's fought pretty low-level competition throughout his career, so that's a bit of a question mark going into this matchup. In his last fight, he actually showcased his grappling by just wearing on his opponent against the cage in the first round, eventually getting the takedown in the second round, and then he was able to get that ground and pound finish. So that was impressive, especially considering that he comes from a kickboxing background. Now, when I originally broke down this fight, I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday when I broke it down, I leaned Elias ever so slightly, but like very low confidence. But after seeing the wins, and again, I don't normally let wins sway me too heavily on one side or the other, but like considering the low confidence that I had with Elias to begin with, and then seeing the size and reach advantage of Lapa, I feel like he might be able to stop those takedowns or at least stay safe enough in the grappling realm should Elias be successful with a few of the takedowns. But then from there, I think Lapa can slowly start chipping away at Elias, keeping him at bay, and then seeing those telegraphed big power shots and takedowns coming his way. That should allow him to kind of pivot off and cut an angle to make it harder for Elias to complete those offensive techniques. From there, look for Lapa to keep his jab active, maybe mix it up in the clinch as he sees Elias starting to slow down, and then he starts to wear on him as this fight gets into deeper water. So there's a big, a solid chance that Elias could get that early takedown and, wipe Lapa quickly. But if he's forced to go into deeper water, I think Lapa could be more successful, and he might be worth a little bit of a shot here at underdog odds. So not a whole lot of confidence. Again, earlier this week I picked Elias, but the more that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go with the underdog here in Lapa, lean on his striking advantage, hopefully pray that he can avoid that early finishing nature of Elias, especially on the ground, and then from there start going away with this in the second and third rounds and either winning by knockout or finding that late submission as an exhausted Elias tries to stay in the fight. All right, next up we got the Battle of the Pereiras as we have Rafael Pereira coming in at minus 425 going up against Felipe Pereira, who comes in at plus 325. Now, Pereira had a 3-fight losing streak from 2017 to 2018, but now he finds himself on an 8-fight winning streak with his last 3 wins coming under the LFA banner. The constant in all of those fights was the aggressive and marauder style of Rafael. He's done a great job in terms of utilizing his big explosive strikes. He kind of reminds me of Joanderson Brito and the fact that he just throws with such heavy power in every single strike. Obviously, it looks like he starts to slow down later on in matchups, but he does a great job in terms of still staying active. That first 6-7 minutes, he's usually the one moving forward, throwing big strikes, looking to knock his opponents out. And then after that, when it's clear that he's starting to slow down, he kind of accepts the back foot, but when his opponents try to get off on a few strikes, he tries to throw back with big power and remind them that, hey, I might be slowing down, but I'm still very dangerous and can provide a knockout threat. It's hilarious. See, when he does get hit a few times, he kind of just looks at his opponent in disgust and then throws with such heavy ferocity in return. He's a very entertaining fighter to watch. He tries to mix in takedowns in the latter half of fights as well. And if he can't get that control, he's fine to just going back to backpedaling and throwing big shots every so often. Now he's going up against Felipe Pereira, who comes in as a former champion in another Brazilian promotion. His primary focus and form of attack is the grappling game with his BJJ. 10 of his 13 wins have come by submission, although his level of competition has been mediocre at best. His striking still seems like it needs a lot of work, but once he gets fights to the mat, he looks very slick and smooth. The issue in this matchup against Rafael, though, is that I think that Rafael will be able to shut down those takedowns, as I don't rate Felipe's wrestling all that high. But even if Felipe does get a few takedowns here, I think Rafael, being that little ball of energy that he is going to be very tough for Felipe to hold down, and that should lead to Rafael getting back to the feet. I know I'm switching between Rafael and Rafael, trying to say Rafael as much as I can. But looking at my notes here and seeing the R, it just triggers my brain to say Rafael. But Rafael, more dangerous, more powerful, more hell-bent on landing damage, and I think that will lead to him outpointing Felipe and winning this fight on the scorecards. But again, given how much he slows, and maybe Felipe could be more successful with his takedowns and actually controlling Rafael later on in this matchup. But I think Rafael, similar to Brito, will be tough to hold down, will be too much of a ball of energy for Felipe to control. And that should lead to Rafael to continuously land bigger shots, bigger damage, and eventually get the win on the scorecards here. Our next up, we got Natalia Alves coming in at minus 300 against the LFA newcomer Alexandra Savicheva, who comes in at plus 250. Now, Alves is 3-0 with the LFA and slowly working her way up the card. She's a BJJ brown belt, and that's how we often see her winning her fights, either by taking her opponents to the ground, finding ground and pound opportunities or submissions, or just flat out controlling them. She has great transitions as well. She does a good job in terms of getting her takedowns and then transitioning to dominant positions. I would just like to see her try to improve her ground and pound a little bit more, but also her ability to find submissions and try to get her opponents out of there. You know, doing that slow and steady grapple, lay and pray type of approach is not going to get the desire from the higher level promotions. So Alves is going to have to learn to be a little bit more damaging and finish centric, especially with how dominant and how quickly she can get to dominant positions. It was wild to see her get bloodied up from the back, right, in her last matchup, where she controlled pretty much 95% of that fight from top position, but she was eating some damage from her opponent off their back, but Alves was still able to land enough damage and control to win that fight on the scorecards. Now she's going up against Savicheva, who is a 6-1 Russian prospect who held the Octagon flyweight title. In her following matchup after winning that title, she dropped to strawweight and picked up another win by defeating regional journeywoman Sofia Bagashvili. She utilized her kickboxing background to chip away at Bagashvili, but also had some decent grappling success. Unfortunately, the lone loss on her record has come from a grappling scenario where she got one of her kicks caught. Her opponent immediately took her to the ground, got a full mount almost immediately, eventually got the back and forced a tap from a neck crank position. It's a big red flag. You know, that fight happened about 2 years ago, and I'm sure Savicheva has tried to improve that aspect of her game, but if she's going up against a very high-level BJJ fighter here in Alves, you got to wonder what her chances are of actually winning this fight. Now, she is the better striker, without a doubt. You know, should she stop the takedowns or at least quickly work back to her feet if she gets taken down here against Alves, she'll be able to outstrike Alves and have no problem with it. The issue that I find is that, you know, I think Savicheva will have issues once this fight hits the ground, and I think that we'll see Alves quickly work to those dominant positions, pull out the back take, and then from there, I think she'll be able to get that rear naked choke. But minus 300 is tough to trust considering how behind she'll be if Alves cannot get that takedown and is forced to strike with the better striker. The spot that I'm looking at is actually the under 2.5 at plus 170. Big plus money there, which is usual for women's MMA fights. But considering the stylistic approach in this matchup, if Alves looks minus 300, it probably looks like her getting the finish, especially from the flaws that we've seen from Savicheva's game in the past. So my pick is going to be Alves. Not a whole lot of confidence there. Wouldn't parlay her at minus 300, but I'd rather take a little bit of a risk here on the under 2.5 and hope that Alves can get the back of Savicheva. Or on the flip side, if Savicheva keeps this fight standing and just lays it on Alves, maybe she's able to produce a TKO from a barrage of strikes there. So very polarizing fight here. I'm going to go Alves by submission, but the under 2.5 is probably where I would focus most. All right, co-main event here. Fun fight between Marcelo Marques, who comes in at minus 280, and Felipe Oliveira, who comes in at plus 240. Now, Marques had a closer fight than I expected him to last time around, where he went out and had a split decision victory over an 8-0 opponent. That pushed his record to his LFA record to 3-0 and an 11-0 overall. He's a high-level BJJ black belt who normally has no issues dragging his opponents to the ground, getting to a dominant position, and quickly finding finishes. But he also has a good enough gas tank to go 15 minutes if he needs to. He faced a very aggressive fighter last time around, and it seemed like the activity level of his opponent forced Marques to slow down a little bit quicker than we expected, but he was still landing good shots and effective shots while moving backwards, given the explosiveness and power that power threat that he presents. I think that's a good learning lesson for him. I think that it's not often that he'll face somebody that's going to pressure him that heavily and somebody that can fend off his grappling advances as well as his last opponent did. But it is encouraging that he's been taking kickboxing and grappling. Well, grappling, we already know he's high level at, but he's been taking kickboxing bouts since his last LFA matchup, showing that he's trying to improve that aspect of his game. Because, you can work on improving your striking as much as you want in the training room, but there's nothing like live action. And that's what he's been getting as of late. And I think that's going to help him translate that into the mixed martial arts game. Now he's going up against Felipe Oliveira, who, when we saw him in the LFA cage last time around, he was actually knocked out by recent UFC signee Marcio Barbosa, who knocked out Damon Wilson on the Contender Series the other week, and Oliveira fell short via the same method there. Oliveira is normally the guy that takes an aggressive approach to his striking, but he was outgunned that night by Barbosa, who clearly had more power, was faster, more explosiveness, and that's how we saw him end up losing that fight. He managed to bounce back on the European regional seed for, I believe it was Fight Cage Series, I believe it is, where he actually won the title of the promotion that night by split decision. It was a close fight with the constant pressure of his opponent, which is kind of reverse from what Felipe is used to in his fights. He's usually the one moving forward, but his opponent continues to move forward, throwing a lot of feints, level changes, but Felipe did a great job, even off of his back foot, to counter his opponent, and he showcased he was the better striker and landed more effective damage throughout that fight. He was able to get some decent grappling situations as well to try to make it look a little bit more convincing in his favor, but the fight still did go to a split decision. Luckily, he was able to get his hand raised that night. He had a 6-fight winning streak going into that loss against Barbosa. Now he's looking to build some momentum after that title winning performance that he had for FCS, or whatever that promotion is called. I think Marques will be able to get his dominant grappling game going here. Oliveira could have some success in terms of working out of some of those bad spots, but I think once Marques really establishes that top control, he'll be able to get Oliveira into some bad spots, and then from there, I think he eventually finds a submission. I can understand people being hesitant at minus 280, especially with the form that we saw Marques in the last time around. But I think that this is a very tough stylistic matchup for Oliveira. I don't think he has as much aggressiveness as Marquez's last opponent. So I think that's where Marques can really shine by kind of using some of that aggressiveness against Oliveira. Well-timed level changes, takedowns, control, getting the back, eventually getting a submission. And I think Marques dominates here and eventually gets that early finish. So the under is intriguing, but I think Marques gets the win here, and I wouldn't mind parlaying him at this number either. All right. That brings us to our strawweight title fight headliner between champion Lanny Silva, who as of right now comes in at minus 155, going up against Aitza Bertolso, who comes in at plus 135. Now, Silva dropped a split decision to an eventual title challenger, but since then she was able to rack up 2 wins, and that earned her a title shot against champion Rose Conceição. Now, that was a matchup where it seemed like the grappling of Conceição really struggled, because that's usually the shining part of Conceição's game, but I think that really showed the improvements in Silva's game, who, when she did lose, it was due to the grappling. But we saw her take a ton of grappling competitions. She's improving her grappling at a certain a good rate. Her takedown defense is improving. But what I'm most impressed by is when she is taken down, and when she was taken down by Conceição, she's either throwing up submissions immediately, getting butterfly hooks, and then creating reversals or scrambles, or eventually working back to her feet. And she's very adamant about it. She's very quick about it. She doesn't waste too much time, because she knows that's how she's losing fights, is by staying on her back. So if she can continue improving that aspect of her game of just continuously working back to her feet, that's where she can showcase her Muay Thai, which is so dangerous, just as we saw when she landed that nasty head kick knockout against Conceição to win the title. If you watch that fight back, the entire fight was pretty much her landing body kicks and leg kicks and body kicks and just continuously putting that in Conceição's head, and it was clearly having an effect on Conceição. And then in that third round, She landed the head kick, and you can see Conceição trying to block the body, not even thinking that it's going to come to the head. And it was as clean of a head kick as you can see, as Conceição went completely out. So very, very impressive knockout there from Silva, showcasing the fight IQ, the tactical nature of her striking game, and how she's improving even as young as she is. I believe she's only 24 years old as well. Now she's going up against Aitza Bertolso, who is a high-level prospect coming from the amateur scene, where she initially went 16-1. Now she represented Bahrain back in the day, and Bahrain's done a great job in terms of going to Brazil, getting these amateur fighters to represent them on the IMMAF platform, which is why you often see a lot of Brazilians repping Bahrain, and then once they turn pro, they go back to Brazil, and then they're able to represent Brazil once again. But Bertolso was one of those fighters. She did a great job in terms of getting to the pro ranks. She's put together a 6-0 record, pretty much done a great job of just stifling her opponents on the mat. We've seen her try to strike, but it's more so just to get a little bit of experience. And then when she really wants to dominate, she looks to get opponents to the ground, and she's done a great job in terms of smothering them there. She's had one fight where she's kind of struggled to assert that grappling dominance and was forced to fight with a better striker, or strike with a better striker. And that's where we saw her actually win by split decision. It was a very close fight. She almost fumbled the bag there, but that kind of goes to show that she still has some work to do in the striking game. She's long, she's lanky for this strawweight division, but she needs to have more confidence and throw with a little bit more power so that she can showcase her dominance there. If Silva showcases the get-ups and takedown defense that we saw from her in the Conceição fight, I think she batters Bertolso on the feet. The issue that I have is I think that Bertolso is a better BJJ specialist than Conceição. So once Bertolso gets the fight to the ground, maybe she'll have a little bit better control. And that's maybe why a lot of people are betting Bertolso, who, just a few days ago, she was about plus 200, plus 220. Now she's down to a plus 135. I understand the love. I think people are just kind of settling out this line now. But if this line continues to move in Bertolso's favor and we get Silva closer to that underdog line, that's where I might be a little bit interested in taking a shot on the champion. Again, I think she's the better striker. I think she's made enough improvements in the grappling realm that she can shut that style of Bertolso down. But very tough to tell. There haven't been enough fights for me to truly plant my flag on the Silva side of things and say, hey, she's going to win this fight. She's going to stop the takedowns 100%. She wins this fight. I think she wins. I think this fight goes over 4.5 rounds. I think Silva out-damages Bertolso, butchers her on the feet, wins this fight on the scorecards. But again, very, very close fight. I'm going to see where the odds go before fight time and then decide if I want to pull the trigger or not. There you guys go. Full card breakdown for LFA 216, which goes down Friday. Obviously, we got the Paris card kicking off a little bit earlier than usual, noon Eastern start time. So make sure you guys check out all the UFC Paris content that I got for you guys on the YouTube channel. Later tonight, I'll be dropping the free parlay for you guys. We cashed it last week. We'll see if we can do it once again. Check the YouTube page for that. I'll see you guys later tonight. Peace.